Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and welcome to the Livonia Chamber of Commerce Candidate Forum, featuring the candidates running for this fall's city offices. I'm Dan West, the president of the Livonia Chamber of Commerce, and I'll be the moderator for this program. We thank our friends from Schoolcraft College for being the sponsor of this evening's event, and for everyone in the audience for joining us this evening. This forum is designed to be an informational program to give Livonia's business people and residents a chance to learn more about the candidates running for mayor of Livonia and on the Livonia City Council in an election taking place Tuesday, November 7th. The Livonia Chamber of Commerce is a nonpartisan, nonprofit trade organization that represents nearly 1,000 businesses and organizations. The Chamber does not make any candidate endorsements. Also, we want to thank special thanks to Livonia City Television for recording this forum so others can watch the rebroadcast on cable access and also on the city's YouTube channel and other platforms in the coming days. The Livonia Chamber also provided an avenue to meet the candidates running for city clerk and city treasurer. Both positions are full-time roles that carry a 4-year term. The candidates for city clerk are Lori Miller and Linda Scheel, and the candidates for city treasurer are Andrew Lendrum and Susan Nash. Each candidate was provided up to 3 minutes to answer 3 questions in a already recorded video recording. Those videos will be released on the Livonia Chamber website tomorrow morning. You can see our website at www.livonia.org. Tonight, we will open with the 60-minute forum for the 6 candidates on the ballot who are competing for 4 seats on the Livonia City Council. Then, we will hold a 45-minute forum involving the 2 candidates on the ballot running for mayor. The Chamber's Government Affairs Committee established the format and the initial questions for these forums. Members of the audience are invited to ask questions of both the mayoral and city council candidates by submitting them on 3x5 cards and handing them at the end of their seating rows. We got Jane on one side, Eric on the other, and you can grab pens and 3x5 cards up there. The submissions will be screened to prevent questions from being redundant, inaccurate, or personal, and we will ask as many questions as we can in the time allotted. With that, it's time to introduce our 6 candidates running for the 4 seats on the Livonia City Council. In alphabetical order, they are Jim Beringhouse, Carrie Budzinski, Rob Drzwicki, Brandon McCullough, Scott Morgan, and Martha Tashnik. The top 3 finishers will earn a 4-year term on the council, and the 4th place finisher will earn a 2-year term on the council. A council member holds a part-time position on the city's 7-member legislative body. The top overall vote getter will also earn the position of city council president and mayor pro tem for the next 2 years. Each candidate will be invited to make a 1-minute opening statement and then a 1-minute closing statement. The candidates will each have 1 minute to respond to a question. Each candidate will also be allowed 2 30-second rebuttals after they answered a question to respond to comment made on the same question by an opponent. The candidates are arranged in order of numbers that were drawn prior to the beginning of the forum. Accordingly, we will rotate in order with each question a different person answering first. Laura Tamuch and Sherry Davidek are in the front row and will serve as our timekeepers and inform the candidates how much time they have left. With that, we will begin with Mr. Jim Beringhouse with your opening statement.
Great. Thank you, Dan, and good evening, everyone. I would like to thank the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event and the audience for your interest in the upcoming city election. I'm Jim Beringhouse. I'm not your typical candidate. I'm an interested resident, just like yourself, with a passion for our community and a desire to drive change in it. To meet the future, Livonia needs to think outside the box. With my business experience of 38 years at Fiat Chrysler and my sustainability background with the Greenleaf Commission, I'll bring a fresh set of eyes and a whole bunch of new ideas to council. But here's one thing, I can't do it alone. I need your help. I need your opinions and I need your support. I promise to listen, learn, and fight for you. So let's roll up our sleeves and let's make Livonia an even greater community. Thank you.
Mrs. Carrie Budzinski, your opening statement.
I began serving Livonia almost 20 years ago as a page at the Livonia Civic Center Library. It's where I met my husband, and we're now homeowners, raising our 2 boys here. I'm the board chair of the Library Commission. I'm the Community Affairs Vice President for the Livonia Junior Chamber, the co-founder of Vote Run Serve Livonia and the Livonia Women's Connection, and a proud PTA mom at Niji-Iro Elementary School, Livonia Public Schools Japanese immersion program. I know Livonia, I know how to bring people together and to solve problems, and I'm asking for your vote for City Council.
Mr. Scott Morgan, your opening statement.
Yes, thank you. Dan, I'd like to thank you and the Chamber for hosting this event. I've been a resident of the City of Livonia for over 26 years now. I was a policeman here in the City of Livonia for 25 years. I was a Marine for 5 years prior to that. I was a union president for the police union for the last 10 years of my career. I spent time on the zoning board. I've been a council member now for 1.5 years. I'm here to serve the residents. I wish to continue to serve the residents in the city of Livonia. I enjoy serving the people. That's what I've been placed here to do, and I will continue to do that. And I would really appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Mr. Rob Drzwicki, your opening statement.
Thank you to Dan and the Chamber, specifically Dawn, Laura, and Sherry, who actually always make this stuff happen. My name is Rob Drzwicki. I'm a 40-year lifelong resident here in Livonia, product of schools like St. Michael's and like Stevenson and like Schoolcraft, our sponsor, and like Madonna University. This city has given me everything, including 2 amazing young men who are 12 and 13 and being raised just about 2.5 minutes from their grandparents' house. That is what I'm striving to do here, is to maintain our status as a multi-generational community. And that's going to take a lot of work and a lot of creativity, and I'm ready to roll up my sleeves. Thank you.
Mr. Brandon McCullough, your opening statement, please.
Thank you. Thank you to the Chamber. Thanks for everybody coming out tonight to learn more about the candidates. My name is Brandon McCullough. I've been on council for the last 3.5 years. Lifelong resident of Livonia, went to Cleveland, went to Emerson, graduated at Livonia Franklin, met my high school sweetheart, Casey, who's actually teaching there right now. She never escaped the hallways. We're raising our incredible 9-year-old daughter, Harper, who goes to Buchanan. I'm a proud graduate of Lawrence Tech, go Blue Devils. Got into construction. Some of my background is I was a director of construction at Habitat for Humanity. I went over and was a facilities director for the city of Novi, and now I'm with Northville Township. We still have a lot of work to do, and the last 3.5 years have been a pretty good time. We're at a pivotal time with the city, and right now is a very important time for everybody here to make the right decision for getting some people behind the dais that are right for the city. Thank you.
And Mrs. Martha Tachnik for your opening statement.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, the Chamber, for hosting tonight. I grew up in Livonia, in Old Rosedale, and when my husband of 30 years and I decided it was time to buy a house and start a family, Livonia is the community we absolutely chose. We wanted that same childhood that I had for our children, David and Kate, who actually are Livonia Public School students themselves, or were, and are graduates of Livonia Stevenson. I myself am a Livonia Public Schools employee. I am the math chair at Churchill High School. And what a lot of people don't know about me is prior to my foray into education, I worked in purchasing and logistics at Marshall Fields, Dayton Hudson, and Montgomery Wards as a buyer. So I do have a business background as well. I currently serve on the Livonia Zoning Board and have fought to keep Livonia a great place to work and live. I have a master's degree in education right from Livonia's old Madonna and a bachelor's degree from Michigan State. I am a lifelong Livonia resident, and I am willing to commit to this city and do anything we need to get done.
All right, thank you. The first question will go to Mrs. Budzinski. That question, what can be done to increase the pool of talent and maintain existing talent to serve as police officers and firefighters in Livonia? What can be done to increase the pool of talent and maintain existing talent to serve as police officers and firefighters in Livonia? Mrs. Budzinski.
So one of the first things that could be done and was done was reestablishing pensions for our first responders. That was a really important action that was taken over the last couple of years. But it's not enough. I've talked to both unions, and there are grave concerns that we're not attracting enough talents, that we're not fully staffed, and that we need to do more. We need to be creative with how, what our work environment is, what the work-life situation is for our first responders. They're dedicating their life, their family's time, their own safety, and they want to have full confidence that we're attracting the best talent, retaining the best talent, so when they're out in the field, they feel safe, secure, and ready to serve.
Mr. Morgan.
Yes, thank you. So I was a union president for 10 years, the last 10 years of my career as a Livonia police officer. And that is a very complicated question because I was one of the key people who worked on putting the defined benefit back into place and worked on trying to have medical put in where the police officers didn't have to quite pay as much because the pay has to be, with the pay that they get, it needs to be reduced so they can have the proper benefits in the future. And I was working on getting the defined benefit in, and we had that completed by the time I was leaving. And there's a lot that's just too complicated to answer right now, but there's a lot of, in the short time that we have here. But other cities are taking away from what we currently have. We need to bone up the benefits. So thank you.
Mr. Drzwicki.
I agree with Scott. There's no silver bullet. There's no one answer to give to this. Pensions were a great step forward. I think one of the keys is that we're losing those folks in their first 5 years. We'll train them up and we'll spend all this money and invest Livonia into them. Just like we want our kids and our grandkids living here, we want those officers, those police officers and those firefighters to stay here for the long run. And I think we need to do a better job of maintaining them in those first 5 years so that they stick around for the full career path.
Mr. McCullough.
Thank you. So back in 2019, obviously that was one of my big platforms, was ensuring that we had a deficit. We solved that with the pensions. Sure, we did. But just like some of the other candidates have stated, you have to stay competitive. You've got neighboring communities that are looking to hire officers right out of the academy. And, so my day job, I work for Northville Township. And I've heard different communities offer different things. So it's on us. If we want the best police and fire, we have to ensure that we're staying ahead of it and being proactive rather than reactive. When you're reactive, we're going to get in the spot where we're missing 20 to 30 officers. We want to be proactive and offer Livonia as somewhere to have an entire career, raise a family. We want them here for 20, 25 years and out. That's the beautiful thing about the pension. So ensuring that we're staying innovative and providing the right things and benefits is going to keep us on top. Thank you.
Mrs. Tashnik.
Thank you. One of the reasons I chose to run is because of public safety. That is one of my top priorities in Livonia. We need to make sure our city stays a safe place to work and live, and this only happens if we make public safety a top priority. I am committed to providing police and fire with the resources that they need so that they can recruit and retain the very best. Some of my colleagues up here have already stated it's that 5-year problem we have. We need to be competitive with our neighboring communities so our first responders can afford not only to live here but to work here. And this is going to be important going forward. We want to be the public safety departments that candidates want to be at. Livonia needs to be the destination departments. So we want them to consider to serve our city with excellence and to continue to want to be here.
Mr. Beringhouse.
Thank you. The defined pension benefit was a positive first step in terms of addressing the personnel problem, but I think it's running a lot deeper than that. When I've talked to police and fire department personnel, it's issues with benefits where why do I have to wait a week for an MRI? It's excessively long shifts. If you look at the work environment in any organization, whether it's City of Livonia or private business, you look at the employees from a viewpoint of are they receiving recognition? What's the culture in the organization? Do they understand the mission of the organization? Are they connected to the organization? And so a lot of it's cultural and also the management style. You're getting a younger candidate in these areas. These people want quality of life issues. They want a more balanced work-life schedule with their families. These are important things to consider. It goes beyond salary, and it also goes beyond benefits. It goes beyond the culture within the organizations. Thank you.
All right, our next question will begin with Mr. Morgan. There's been debate at City Hall about updating Livonia's non-discrimination ordinance. What does an effective NDO look like to you? There's been debate at City Hall about updating Livonia's non-discrimination ordinance. What does an effective NDO look like to you? Mr. Morgan.
Well, thank you. So the NDO that was proposed is very limiting based on the information that we were given. We have local and state laws and federal laws that cover the NDO. There is no need for the city of Livonia to back that up by reducing the law and the fine for an NDO. So what was proposed is that we would charge a business $150 if someone violated an NDO. If you take someone and you charge them for doing a non-discrimination or in discriminating against someone, they will be charged under the state law and be charged with the appropriate fines and jail time as necessary. So no, I will not support an NDO in the city of Livonia. It's not necessary. Thank you.
Mr. Drzwicki.
I didn't like the NDO as written, and I've been on the record about that from the get-go. I'm somebody that deeply cares about those affected and named in that ordinance, though. What needed to happen when it all went down was that these 6 folks or the 7 folks that were up here should have maybe talked it out and answered your question then. We have a perception of a diversity problem here in Livonia, whether you believe it or not, and we need to make sure that we can maintain our status as a great city to live in, and that's one of the things that people care about, and it's one of the things that I care about. So I don't have a silver bullet, and I don't think anyone does, but I think this needs to be hashed out between 7 equals up here on this dais. I would love to be one of those.
Mr. McCullough.
Thank you. So I was a huge supporter of the non-discrimination ordinance, and I will tell you that we did study the non-discrimination ordinance over probably the course of a year. Some of the issues that we had, I'll be completely honest, that ordinance that was proposed was probably as watered down as you could get. Everything was already protected at federal and state levels, and you could make an argument for that. You could make an argument that we could find the businesses. But I could tell you this, if there was an instance that happened at a local business, it's going to end up on all things Livonia quick. And the court of public opinion is going to be worse than a $50 fine. I can trust me on that. The biggest thing for me is, when I got on council, I became an ally to all walks of life. And seeing visions from different people on how they saw Livonia. And I thought that would have been a huge monumental thing to say that Livonia, to everybody out there, that Livonia is a place that's welcome for everything. And, we could have had discussions. That day that it got turned down was a bad day for Livonia. Thank you.
Mrs. Tashnik.
Thank you. As a classroom teacher, every single day I advance the ideals of the NDO in my classroom. I have students from various backgrounds, cultures, religions, sexual orientation, abilities, disabilities, and in my room we are one community. I believe in the spirit of the NDO, but I don't believe in the wording as was presented to council. I really am worried that laws and ordinances can have unintended circumstances, and this was going to be one of those cases. Should the issue of the NDO present itself before council again, I would be absolutely willing to talk to the administration so that we can work on the wording and make sure we're maintaining individuals' and businesses' rights and freedoms. At the same time, we need to make sure every citizen in Livonia feels that they're a part of the community. I want this to be welcoming, and I want them to feel valued and heard in Livonia.
Mr. Beringhouse.
Thank you. First step in approaching the NDO, I think, would be to look at the 2 or 3 existing ordinances that are currently on the book and streamline those and update those. They haven't been really looked at since 1982. The second thing is I think we need to look at the time frame. Back when the original NDO was turned down by City Council, that was in December. Since then, the world's moved forward. In March of this year, the state of Michigan expanded the Elliott-Larsen Act to include discrimination that protected sexual orientation and gender identity. Then in June, Governor Whitmer established a state commission to oversee these laws. Now, in terms of Livonia, I'm willing to look at how a local ordinance could maybe streamline or complement the existing state ordinance so that we have a comprehensive, all-around NDO ordinance that covers both state level and local levels as well. Thank you.
Mrs. Budzinski.
Topics like this are complicated because it brings in a lot of feelings from a lot of different people. And at the end of the day, I think it's that people felt let down by this city that non-discrimination ordinance couldn't get passed. And, you know, it is a responsibility of our elected officials to look at what residents want and need and address those. I hope that if that issue comes forward again, that the city council members are able to make those conversations more public and inclusive so that maybe we can find compromise in other ways. I don't think anyone who voted against it felt that discrimination is good. They just didn't like the NDO as it was proposed. So let's find something that works for everyone so that everyone can feel welcome in Livonia.
All right, our next question will begin with Mr. Druzwicki. This question, Livonia is among several Metro Detroit communities seeing more proposals for apartment projects. How do you assess the need for apartments in Livonia, and how would you work with developers and residents on these proposals? Livonia is among several Metro Detroit communities seeking more proposals for apartment projects. How do you assess the need for apartments in Livonia, and how would you work with developers and residents on these proposals? Mr. Druzwicki.
Thank you. I've been active and engaged in this community for a number of years, and I've been to a lot of city council meetings, watched them on YouTube when I couldn't make it, been to planning and CPA meetings. There is not a single apartment development that is ever, rejoiced about by their surrounding community, it seems. It always seems as though there's a groundswell of folks that don't want an apartment complex right by their homes. And I get it, it's tough. In some of these, when we watch the planning commission, sometimes there's a 4-story building that's going to be about 20 feet from the backyard of somebody's house. It doesn't seem to make sense. A lot of conversation needs to be had, and a lot of tough decisions on where these things will be placed. We need apartment complexes. If we're going to be a multi-generational community, we need more places for our elders and for our kiddos.
Mr. McCullough.
Thank you. So obviously, being on council over the last 3.5 years, we've been in the thick of it, in the front lines. And you know what? Apartments in general, I'm going to go kind of a higher level on this, is I've stood by the right development. So you know what? We've got Livonia Vision 21. It's a very innovative plan. We need to have, if we want to be an age-in-place community, we have to have all types of housing. I'd like to see condos. I'd like to see detached and attached homes, something that's smaller for some of our seniors to be able to sell the homes that they're living in and move downsize and get some more families in. The issue that I have is with some of these developments that have been in the news is they're not the right development for those spots. And you need people on council that are going to be the voice of the 93,000 people in this city and not the developers. You need that kind of voice. And you know what? We're open to development, but we need to work together with the developers and ensure that it has harmony in the surrounding area. Thank you.
Mrs. Tashnik.
Thank you. You know, Livonia's neighborhoods are the heart and soul of our community, and we need to make sure any development that we approve fits in with our neighborhoods. I believe in preserving the essence of our neighborhoods, promoting local businesses, and nurturing the sense of pride we have in our city. That being said, we need to look closely at proposals like the 7 Mile in Farmington and make sure it fits the neighborhood. While a new market would be an improvement to where the closed, blighted Kmart store is, I do not believe we need a 4-story apartment building right adjacent to it. This does not fit in with that neighborhood right there. And I do believe that we need to protect property rights of business owners as well, and we have to look at developments, but they need to be smart, sensible developments, developments that we can sustain, developments that are needed. So that is the one thing. As we continue to grow in our city, we need to balance that development with environmental sustainability and ensure responsible land use.
Mr. Beringhouse.
My first step in working with developers would be to ensure that the proposed development is compatible with existing neighborhoods in the area. That's a key point. Our neighborhoods are to be defended and protected and treasured for the asset that they are to the community. The other thing, too, is we look back to the Livonia Vision 21 Master Plan. If you read the master plan, there's one section in there called Missing Middle. And what that is we need transitional buildings from single-story homes to multi-story buildings. And you can do this with the addition of townhouses, with the addition of duplexes, with the addition of creative architecture that'll create some type of transition zone from a residential neighborhood to a four-story apartment, not putting them side by side and having this stark contrast, and not only that, but concerning residents with potentially losing property values and losing privacy as well. Thank you.
Mrs. Budzinski.
I watch every city council meeting, so I've seen these proposals for four-story apartment buildings come up time and again. And one of the things that concerns me most is that it is not against our zoning ordinance to do so, which puts our city government in a complicated position when developers are putting forward proposals for their privately owned property that fit into what our current laws say. I would like to see us look at implementing a two-story residential height ordinance that would that would set the expectation that fits with what our residents have said time and again. They don't want high buildings. Two-story residential height ordinance could get a variance. If we have a good proposal like at Haggerty and 7 Mile where 4 stories make sense, we could do that. But setting the baseline, the expectation for both developers and for residents, that two-story residential height is our baseline.
And Mr. Morgan.
Yes, thank you. So I'm always willing to work with businesses and take a look at what they propose. This has come in front of us several different times during the time I've been on council. And there's a lot of issues, and it has to fit. If the apartments fit in the area, that's where they should go. If they're looking to put an apartment complex right in the middle of a residential zone, that's probably not going to work. We do welcome families, we welcome everyone, and we want people to come into our city. One of the things that I have suggested is that we put senior living or single-story residence in some of these areas that are run down or dilapidated or property that we have. And that would be very good for the community, well-maintained, something that we would like to keep up. And, but it's very difficult to comply with everything. Thank you.
Mr. Dyswicki wants to use his rebuttal here.
Not truly a rebuttal. 7 Mile and Farmington is a big name in this town. Everybody sees it. I grew up there. I rode my bike up to Perry Drugs and Kmart as a kid. Growing up at 7 and Gill. Nobody hates the blight at that corner more than me. But I also know that that 4-story apartment complex, when they laid out that plan, I knew the backyards of the families that were going to be overlooked by that. When they say it needs to be the right development, that's what we're talking about.
All right, thank you. We'll go to our next question, and we'll start with Mr. McCullough. Can you share an example of where you collaborated effectively with someone with whom you had a disagreement or political differences, and what were the results of those efforts? Can you share an example of where you collaborated effectively with someone with whom you had a disagreement or political differences, and what were the results of those efforts? Mr. McCullough.
Thank you. I think that's a general prereq for a city council member. One thing that I've always heard stories about is back when Ed McNamara used to be mayor, I heard stories that there were 7 council members. They were all different minds, but they can get along with the number one notion of looking out for Livonia. And I think that we have an opportunity and we have a service to our community to ensure that this election we have that. We don't all have to be like minds, but we should all work together with the goal in improving the city services and the community. We have huge silos between the schools, between service groups. We need to break those down. I've tried over the 3.5 years. It's one of my big things that I want to continue on. Did you hit the stop thing yet, or you still got some seconds? Okay, cool. But I think that Livonia has been complacent in a lot of areas, and we've got to do our part to make sure that we're connected and use every resource as we need it. Thank you.
Mrs. Tashnik?
Thank you. As a classroom teacher, I have to deal with conflict every single day, and I also have to deal with compromise every single day, not only with my students, but with my colleagues as well. And I would say, really, there's no one on this behind the dais sitting here right now that I can't work with. And I look forward to working with all of you. The most important thing is we have to be active listeners, and we have to express our thoughts respectfully and look for common ground. And I think the use of empathy is going to be very important when we're talking about this. I actually just yesterday had a student that I caught cheating on an exam, and instead of just ripping up her test and giving her a 0, I pulled her aside and we had a nice chat about what happened. And I was empathetic to what had happened. She, had to work late, she didn't have time to study, and she made a cheat sheet and snuck it in the room. I offered her a retest for partial credit. She promised it would never happen again, and we were able to solve that conflict. This is the strength that I have, that ability to foster relationships with people of all, issues, of all partisan context. There's really no one that I will ever agree with 100%, including my own husband, but probably less than that. But for the most part, you can always work together. Thank you.
Mr. Beringhouse?
Thank you very much. The experience I recall is when we formed the Greenleaf Commission. Originally, the Greenleaf Commission is the city's environmental commission. Originally started as a citizens advisory group with 7 residents. And over the years, we worked with the city and negotiated to make it a full-formed, formal commission. Now, to do this, there were differences of opinions, disagreements on how to approach it, but basically, what you have to fundamentally do is, one, you separate the problem from the individuals and focus on the problem itself. And as my colleagues here indicated, you look for common ground, common interests that you can agree on. Sometimes they're big pieces, sometimes they're small agreements, but it all accumulates into one common goal where everybody can consensus on it and agree with it and move forward.
Mrs. Budzinski?
I'm really disheartened by the divisive nature of our society, and so it's something that I actively work to improve. One of the things that I am most proud of is, one, my relationship with Councilwoman Laura Toy, but 2, that she'd reached out to me late last year and asked if we could brainstorm and come up with a way to help bring women in our community together. She said decades ago this wasn't an issue, and that people with partisan different of opinions came together, socialized together, worked on projects together, and she wanted to do more of that. So this winter we launched the Livonia Women's Connection. We've had 3 events this year, and they were fantastic. They were co-hosted by people from different political parties. We were all together, and it was fun. It's fill your cup type of things, and I think it's so important that we don't shut each other off if we disagree, but find ways to connect and get to know each other.
Mr. Morgan?
Yes, as being on the council, Councilman McCullough and I don't see eye to eye on most political issues, but we're able to work our way through it. We have a lot of issues in Livonia, a lot of them to do with land issues and people wanting to put up things that buildings and other type of structures that may not go with the neighborhood. And a lot of times we have to talk to people, we have to discuss the issue and see if we can come to an agreement of some type to make sure that we're able to see if we can make this project go forward, and if it works for the city, works for the community, and works for the residents, we try to make that happen. So there's so many issues that we have that we try to work out on a daily basis. That's very tough to do. So,
Mr. Drzwicki?
I would have lost a bet on that one. I assumed that Councilman Morgan was going to steal my answer, which is the word mission. As a Marine Corps vet and a police officer, you start with the mission. You start with what everybody agrees with. In this case, it's Livonia. In the case of the nonprofits I've worked with, it's whatever their mission happens to be, whether it's shaving your head for kids' cancer that everybody can agree with, or it's helping people get accessibility because of various mobility issues that they might have in other career paths I've had. if you start with the mission, it doesn't matter what your political stripe is. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican, a Democrat, a Libertarian, or anything. Your race, religion, creed don't matter as long as you're starting with the right question and you're willing to answer that question together.
All right, our next question, back by popular demand, we're going to go into our lightning round where we ask 3 lighthearted questions which are designed to learn a little bit more about the candidates and, put a little bit, lighten the mood here for a little minute here. So the first question will go to Mrs. Tashnik.
Oh, I get to start.
What was your first concert?
Oh, my first concert. Okay, I'm going to date myself a little bit. I must have been 3 when I went, but it was Journey. And Bryan Adams opened for us, and we were at Kobo, to put that in.
So don't stop believing.
Don't
So,
stop.
Mr. Beringhouse, your first concert.
Yeah, my first concert was with Bob Seger, and the interesting fact about that is, at that time, Bob Seger was the warm-up act. So, to answer your question, yes, I dated myself.
Ms. Budzinski.
Well, I'll date myself too. My first concert was In Sync at the Palace, and so they may be doing a reunion tour, so very exciting.
Mr. Morgan.
All right, here we go.
That would be Dolly Parton.
What venue?
I think it was Pine Knob, but I don't recall exactly. You know what?
Were you outside?
You know what? No, actually, now that I think about it, no, I wasn't. So maybe
That narrows
He
it
was
down.
probably distracted.
All right, Mr. Dizwicki, your first concert.
Yeah, at the ripe old age of 12, I saw Sting at Pine Knob. 6th row, just off center, too. Great seats.
And Mr. McCullough, your first show.
All right, Bobby Brown with Mary J. Blige at
Nice.
the Palace. Yeah, it was an interesting time, and then followed with White Zombie.
Wow.
Yeah, kind of flipping it around. Yeah.
All right, next question. This will go to Mr. Beringhouse first. Who's your favorite cartoon character?
Wile E. Coyote. It's good. He keeps trying, but he never wins.
Mrs. Budzinski.
I'll say Winnie the Pooh. It was my dad's favorite for me. So.
Mr. Morgan.
Elmer Fudd.
Mr. Dizwicki.
1984's Optimus Prime from the Transformers.
All right, I thought you were going to steal this. He-Man, all day long. Come on, let's go.
How do I follow
Passionate.
that? I've got Donald Duck over here.
And your favorite?
Donald Duck.
Okay, I didn't hear that. Okay, very good. So, all right, next question. Last of the lighthearted ones here to Mrs. Budzinski first. If you could meet any living person for dinner, who would it be and why?
Oh my gosh.
Any
See,
living-
my favorite people are all dead.
That doesn't answer the question.
I'll say Laura Toy because we're supposed to go to Luigi's and get some lobster ravioli, and I didn't have dinner tonight.
Mr. Morgan.
Ronald Reagan.
He's got to be
he's
alive.
gotta be alive.
Living.
This is my problem.
Need a living one. Living. I asked which living person.
Oh, I thought you said it didn't matter if they
No,
were.
no, I said no.
Laura.
Lori's doing fine.
Last
Something
report.
that could feasibly happen here. They're alive.
It's a hard question.
You know, I would say George Bush then.
Okay.
Senior, junior?
Well, the one that's alive.
The only one's alive.
One is alive, so I flipped the coin.
Mr. Dizwicki.
Not too intrigued by famous people. I don't know. My uncle Bob. He's a good guy. He lives here in town. He was a deacon for St. Michael's. He's one of my favorite people. I'll have dinner with him any day of the week.
Mr. McCullough.
Jim Jolly is in the audience. He's turned me down every single time. I've been trying to get him to go out to lunch, so I hope that this platform might change his mind.
I think he's RSVPing right now.
Mrs. Tashnik.
So I am going to go with a famous person. Working in a high school, this would get me a lot of street cred if I could get dinner with Taylor Swift. So,
Oh,
Your social media hits you to go through the roof now.
Yes.
Mr. Beringhouse.
Jim Leland. I'm a total Detroit Tiger baseball fan.
All right, thank you for the lightning round there. Now we'll go back, now we got some audience questions here. And the first one, and this one will go to Mr. Morgan to start. How can we attract more young professionals to Livonia? How can we attract more young professionals to Livonia? Mr. Morgan.
Well, I think this community needs some upgrades. We need to have better Wi-Fi. We need to have more community spaces. We need to have a downtown area where there's meeting places, places that people can go on the weekend and gather and have a good time. Maybe locations, larger coffee houses, such as, I know Barnes and Nobles no longer exists, or most of them don't, I should say, but they have a great place where people can congregate and have coffee and just hang out. And I'd love to see that for Livonia, and we've been working on that. And that's something we need to continue to work on, but we need to work harder. So, thank you.
Mr. Drzewiecki.
Yeah, public-private partnerships are generally the answer to these things. What every small community in the nation right now is always saying is they want mixed-use land on these corners, which usually amounts to condos and an ice cream shop. We've seen some of them succeed and some of them fail. I think ultimately what we need to do as Livonians is welcome those folks in. We can be a bit of an exclusive community from time to time, and the more often we can be inclusive, the better. I know my generation's moving back here in larger numbers, and we're raising our kids here, and we're looking for ways to make sure that those kids want to stick around. It's one of the greatest blessings. May you see your children's children. There's no right answer, but we need to do it together. And anybody who tells you they have the right answer is probably mistaken.
Mr. McCullough.
All right, so Livonia was master planned brilliantly, all right? So back in, obviously we had the huge boom in the 70s. We've got industrial corridor with rail. We've got it, expressway access. We're 20 minutes, depending on how fast you're going, downtown. And what's happening right now is you're getting young professionals. They're going to go to college. They move off to Royal Oak, Clawson, or some of these trendy areas. They decide, hey, I'm going to settle down, and they want to come back. So we've got to figure that out, and there's been a lot of great ideas. And some of these pockets of development, whether it's a 7 in Farmington, whether it's 7 in Middlebelt, Plymouth Road corridor, we have these areas of opportunity that we need the right development that could tie into things. I mean, picture this. Could you picture something at 7 in Farmington, the development at Kmart, that would spearhead all the way down to Dro's Produce? It would bump up Winter Garden, it would bump up those businesses, and it would take a district. We've got Livonia Vision 21 where we're looking to do a downtown. So there's a lot of opportunity in there. We just need to reinvent and kind of renovate the city, should we say. Thank you.
Mrs. Tashnik.
Thank you. This is an issue that has been brought to the forefront in recent studies. In fact, I know that Mr. West and the Community Leaders Forum has been studying this as one of the big issues. How do we get these young people back here? How do we get this workforce really to come back home? And we need to make sure we have affordable housing for not only your children but mine so that they want to come back here and live. We also need businesses that will attract them. We want to make sure that Livonia is a destination venue for them to come to. Event venues, those are the kinds of things we're looking for. So we need to make sure that we not only have businesses that will provide work opportunities, job opportunities, we need to continue to make sure our schools are excellent, and that will also drive them back here. Like Mr. McCullough said, oftentimes it's cool to go to Royal Oak for a year or two, but then they find that Livonia is really where they want to be. This is the place where they want to work and live.
Mr. Beringhouse.
Yes, I would first of all build on the strengths of Livonia, which is one, our central location. We all know 20 minutes, we can get downtown, go to Ann Arbor Airport. I mean, it's a luxury. The other thing is owning a home in Livonia is a good investment. That draws younger families, new residents to the area, and then build on those strengths. Again, we need a downtown area. We need gathering places. We have an excellent collection of restaurants. Let's leverage that and build that into some type of design. Also, let's make the city walkable. Let's make it bikeable. And a lot of the younger families, they put a lot of emphasis on the community being environmentally responsible or sustainable. That is not only a drawing card for cities, but for a lot of products as well. Thank you.
So, Mrs. Budzinski.
So my day job is marketing. I run a Little Guide Detroit, which is a regional outlet showcasing events and activities for families to do across Southeast Michigan. So I have a really good understanding about what our surrounding communities have to offer. And one, we're doing an amazing job in Livonia. We are a great place to be. It is about letting people know that, letting people know about the events and the activities that are happening, about the great businesses that are happening. A lot of times it's how you share information, it's how people take it. And we live in a very information saturated culture, and it's communicating with folks where they're at so that they understand. As part of the Livonia Junior Chamber, we promote the small businesses that exist here, because if those businesses are doing successful, other entrepreneurs or businesses that are looking for areas to move to are going to choose to come to Livonia, because they're going to see how those that are already here are responded to. And so that's what I think. We need to just do a better job showcasing what we do in Livonia.
Mr. Dyswicki wants to add something.
I promised my wife I'd use both rebuttals because she loves hearing me talk. We have the numbers, we have the receipts saying that Livonia is an incredibly desirable community to move to. 48154 was one of the top places for folks, for millennials to move into. It's not necessarily an issue that people don't want to move here. Our property values are telling us that. Our values are going up and up and up. What we need is more places for those folks to live, but it's got to be those correct developments. We're darn near 100,000 again, and let's get back there.
All right, the next question will begin again with Mr. Dyswicki. Do you have any ideas for the development of a stronger local and regional public transit system? Do you have any ideas for the development of a stronger local and regional public transit system?
Gosh, I think it'd sure be nice to get into the regional traffic system. It's difficult. Livonia's kind of created itself as an island when it comes to public transportation. And the one thing I know in talking to some of our larger businesses is it's harder to get employees here. Not everybody in Livonia is employed or employable. We can't live in this isolated little bubble. We can't put glass over the 36 square miles here. So we need a better way to do it, whether that's linking into the system that exists around us, or just making a more robust version of what we've got, the way we've kind of waylaid the system here. So I'd be very open to any ideas.
Mr. McCullough?
Thank you. So having collaboration, this is something in the last 3.5 years I know council has been looking into and studying. We have a strong Western Wayne Coalition. We have a strong SEMCOG, which is, Southeast Michigan, League of Cities basically get together. There's grants, there's funding. There's a lot of subject matter experts that dive into this, and something that we could have collaboration with many different cities, whether it's the county, I think would be a first step to get everybody along, try to figure out what kind of funding, because a lot of this is expensive, guys, so we have to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible at the same time. But having that discussion with all the brains in the room would be a good start. Thank you.
Mrs. Tashnik?
Thank you. It's crucial to consider, really the opinions and the needs of our community. Back in 2005, that's when voters decided to opt out of SMART and create our own system. We now see the potential need to reexamine our, position on this. We have a senior population that is growing and needing transportation, and we also need a way to get our workforce into Livonia. Places like NYX have created their own transportation to bring their workers in, and that's very expensive and not really doable for a lot of companies. OHM has been providing, technical consultations with us on that. And, there's going to be other companies besides NYX. We've got Amazon. They're struggling to get their workforce in here as well. Looking at Novi, for example, they spend $4.2 million for SMART, and it is underutilized there. For us, it'd probably be about $1 million, which is roughly $5 million. Something I think we should investigate into is Smart Flex. And if you're not familiar with it, it's an on-demand public transit service, app-based and much more cost-effective.
Mr. Beringhouse?
The need for mass transit is really becoming critical, because one thing that we're realizing is that new development equals new levels of traffic, and we recently saw that with the Farmington and 7 Mile development, where they estimated that between the two stores and the one store, in the apartment building, that would add 7,000 more cars to the road infrastructure. That's not acceptable. We have the Livonia Community Transit Authority, but that's sort of fixed, it's sort of local. I agree with Ms. Tashnik's idea. I think we need a system like SmartFlex. It's app-based, it's flexible. You don't schedule, your ride is on demand, not fixed to any timetable. And I think it would be a good positive start to lay the foundation for some type of mass transit system in the city. Another areas we can look at is, can we do bike share? That's one way for short trips to allow people to just ride bikes or scooters around the city as well.
Mrs. Budzinski?
As a tie into the previous question, I'd say that what younger people are looking for is transit. You know, in a lot of other communities, Chicago, Grand Rapids, Ann Arbor, you know, public transit is an expectation. It's odd that none exists here. So I think we should have a community conversation about public transit. You know, 2005 was a long time ago. A lot has changed. And so where are we at now? I also want to touch on the Livonia Community Transit, which was, you know, a strong point when we left SMART was that this option was going to be available, particularly to seniors and those with disabilities. It has been understaffed. Residents have had a really challenging time making these appointments, which they need in order to get to doctor's appointments, the store, and other things. So I think we also need to look at the Livonia Community Transit, what we've already promised our residents, and make sure that it's operating at top efficiency.
And Mr. Morgan?
Yes, so that's, I was around when we used to have the old system here in Livonia, and the buses used to run, and most of the time I would see them empty. But then it changed, and we came up with the Livonia bus system. And during that time, it functioned very well for quite a bit of time, and then we're having problems with hiring and maintaining drivers. We just recently raised the pay for the drivers to see if we could keep that bus system going a little bit better. But it's a huge financial responsibility to collaborate with other cities to bring in other bus systems. But I'm always open to the conversation to see exactly what we can do. The SmartFlex is a great idea. I think that's something the city should look into. And I don't know if anybody, when they were pulling in here, saw the 30 buses or so that were sitting in front lot of the police department. I'm pretty sure those are ours. And that is, you know, something we need to keep moving, and we need to make sure that our seniors and our citizens have a way to get around our city. Thank you.
One rebuttal, Mr. McCullough?
So I just wanted to touch base on our local transit. So to put it in perspective, you've heard obviously understaff and staffing issues and maintenance issues. I think at one point recently we were paying $13 to $14 an hour for a bus driver to drive our seniors around. Different communities are hiring $17, $18 for a lifeguard for custodians. If we want to have the best workers and the robust system, again, it goes back to being proactive. We need to ensure a proactive maintenance program with the busing. You know, the seniors, a lot of them rely on it, so ensuring that is a big deal. So just put it in that perspective. Thank you.
All right, our next question, we'll begin with Mr. McCullough on this one. Livonia's opted out of retail marijuana sales, medical and recreational. Would you support re-examining this opt-out decision? Livonia's opted out of retail marijuana sales, medicinal and recreational. Would you support re-examining this opt-out decision? Mr. McCullough.
So this is a very touchy situation, right? You say the word medical marijuana or recreation marijuana, everybody freaks out. Listen, I do not want to see a dispensary next to Handy Dip. I don't want to see a dispensary anywhere near any of our neighborhoods, businesses, schools. But again, we have a robust industrial corridor. Some of it's dilapidated, right? Nowhere near any businesses. I'd be open to looking at a very conservative approach that could limit the licenses, have facade regulations so it's not shiny, but give our residents that are patrons of this an opportunity and grab some of these tax monies. Again, I'm not saying put it into our neighborhoods or anything, but taking another look at it. You know, this is a big tax revenue that's out there, and it's something that we could pair into innovation into some of our dilapidated industrial corridors.
Mrs. Tashnik.
Thank you. Yeah, this continues to be a complex issue. I've been following this issue in neighboring communities that have opted in, especially for marijuana sales. My current stance is that there would not be any benefit at this time to reconsider zoning for this in Livonia. I've been talking to a lot of residents. No one has asked for this when I've been out there talking. there doesn't seem to be an interest really right now. And if you look in the neighboring communities, it seems to be saturated. Their access is there if you want it. Assessing a public opinion on marijuana sales, to me, is the key issue here. We would have to look at regulatory considerations. Definitely, if we ever were to reconsider, we need to partnership with our Livonia Police Department and look at safety issues here. And we need to make sure that there's no underage access. So that would be some of the big issues. It's really important to me, though, that we consider the values and the preferences of our community on this issue. Ultimately, the decision should lie with our residents on retail sales, and we would have to look at very careful consideration.
Mr. Beringhouse.
If this proposal was done through a ballot referendum, naturally the city and city council would have to follow it. But if it does come before city council, I would naturally, as part of my duty as a councilman, review it and take it under consideration. But I would put it under very intense scrutiny because I would want to see the potential location of these sites relative to hospitals, relative to schools, relative to churches. And also, I'd also want to consider the impact that these sites would have on our property values in our community. Early research on the impact on property values, it's kind of mixed based on the region of the country, so those would be my considerations.
Ms. Budzinski.
So one of the most popular comments during more controversial city council meetings is, you know, would you want this by your house? My answer to that is no, I don't. But I've talked to a lot of residents too, and whether it's for regular use, for medicinal use, cannabis is legal in Michigan, and our residents do want access. And I agree with Councilman McCullough that if we do it, it needs to be in a designated industrial area zone, not by anyone's houses, not by other businesses, but very thoughtfully and specifically designed. If residents decide that that's something worth exploring, there is tax dollars there, and, you know, so I think that there could be benefits in that area.
Mr. Morgan.
So, being a resident in the community, and I have a grow operation, I believe, a few doors down from my house, and I can smell it all day long. I also have a lot of sympathy for this, for the community, because I wouldn't want to have something like that at my doorstep. So what I would say to that is, as a councilman, I have to listen to everyone, everyone's opinion, and I enjoy doing that. And I take everyone's information into account, and I make a decision as I see fit. I think it's best to listen to all of our community and then make a decision at that time if that ever does come in front of us. But in general, I am not in favor of that. Thank you.
Mr. Druzwicki.
It's good to go last on this one, so I get to hear what everybody else had to say. I've actually talked about this with a few of the folks that are up on this dais and a number of people in the community. I like Councilman McCullough's idea of, if we do have a very limited conservative approach to this, it's sort of isolated to the industrial area and kind of refurb some of those areas. I will say this, which may come as a surprise to some folks. I'm not seeing 20-somethings and teens utilizing those substances. What I see more of is cancer patients going through chemo who need it to help with their appetite, and for older folks who need to get a good night's sleep and rest their weary bones.
Mrs. Tashnik, rebuttal.
Yes, thank you. Less of a rebuttal, but more kind of a comment. It's coming back to a little bit just on what Mr. Druzwicki just addressed. As a high school teacher, the number one thing we confiscate is THC and vape pens. I would think that we need a long-term study on neighboring communities and how they're dealing with marijuana sales. Obviously, we can't stop medical sales right now, that's legal, but the recreational dispensaries are something we need to really look at. Absolutely, if that's what our community wants, we'll have to take a look at it and do some conservative approaches to sales. And legally, people can grow, and there is plenty of access. Thank you.
Mr. Morgan, rebuttal.
Yes, I'd like to just make a quick rebuttal to some of the statements over here. I just wanted a quick statement, and just so everyone knows, once that door is open, there's no closing it. Thank you.
All right. Please, no. Please, no plus. Please. That's all we have for questions right now. Let's begin the closing arguments with closing statements with Mrs. Tashnik.
Am I arguing or stating?
Statements.
Okay.
Comments.
Thank you, everyone, tonight for coming out. It's great to see so many engaged citizens here tonight. Campaigns and elections are about the future, and we need to make sure that Livonia remains a vibrant and growing community. And I already talked about this a little bit earlier. I want to make sure that your children and my children can buy a house here and are able to raise their families here as well. You know, this only happens if Livonia is a safe place to live, if we continue to have high-quality schools, which I'm thrilled and proud to be a part of, if we honor our seniors, embrace smart and sensible development, protect the culture of our neighborhoods, and make sure we prioritize spending to keep our taxes low while we keep our city services high. Our city is strong, and we have an abundance of community pride here. It's the people in our community that make Livonia so amazing. But we have some work to do. We have some true challenges that we need to address, and you heard about some of those tonight. I promise that I will be a transparent and accessible leader for you. I will be your voice, and I will represent you the way you want to be represented. And I appreciate and would be honored with your vote.
All right, Mr. Beringhouse, your closing statement.
I'd like to thank the Chamber of Commerce and the audience for a great evening. This is the first time I've run for City Council, and I would say that it would be a great honor to represent you on council as well. During my campaign, I've met a lot of great people and visited a lot of beautiful neighborhoods. And I have to say, Livonia is an amazing city. I have a long history of service to the city of Livonia, ranging from work on nonprofit boards to various city commissions like the Zoning Board of Appeal, the Greenleaf Commission, and the Livonia Vision 21 Master Plan Committee. Since I only have 1 minute, you can read about those on jimforlivonia.com. I believe in Livonia and wish to lead it to a bright future. Together we can create a city council that represents the diverse opinions and needs of Livonia residents. So please support Jim Beringhouse for Livonia City Council on November 7th. Thank you.
Mrs. Budzinski, your closing statement.
Yes, as I previously noted, I'm really disappointed and disheartened by how divided we are. And I want to help bring folks together, help people feel connected to our local government and engaged in the process. I believe in building people up and not tearing them down, finding consensus, getting to know people, and developing trust and understanding that can help find common ground and compromise. That's what I want to do on City Council, find solutions to problems that work for everyone. I want to bring people together and help them understand how our government functions so that we can remove barriers that keep so many people from getting involved. We all need to be engaged. I'm asking for your vote for City Council because I would do the work, empower residents to get involved, cheerlead for Livonia regionally, and help make sure my kids grow up with the same strong community my husband and I enjoyed.
Mr. Morgan, your closing statement.
Yes, as a Livonia police officer for the last 25 years, I've served the community. I want to continue to serve the community and the residents of the city. My heart is here in Livonia. I've raised my family here. I worked here. I love this city. This is a great city to live in, and I want to continue to see it move forward. I get probably hundreds of emails, phone calls, letters, and I read every single one of them. I may not be able to respond to all of them, but I do my best. And you know what? Your voice is heard with me. And it's been heard in the past, and it'll be heard in the future. So what I'm asking is on November 7th, please vote for Scott Morgan. I will be your representative. Thank you.
Mr. Drzwicki.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you all for joining us. Apparently, I turned into the marijuana advocate in town. That's not even my thing. I love this town, and we've got the receipts to show that we're a great town to live in. Our property values shoot up, and it's harder to find places to live. I've got friends constantly emailing me trying to find a place near me that's going to go up for sale. We know we're doing great, and we can continue doing that. I think what we need to do to continue that is to maintain a community that's safe, welcoming, and prosperous. Safety comes from our police and our fire. It comes from our city services that keep us safe. Welcoming comes from us to make sure that we're all there as part of this conversation, and everybody who comes into this town, whether they're a second generation or a first, that they're going to be welcome here and prosperous. We need to make sure our business community stays robust and continues moving forward. vote for me.
Sorry, Mr. McCullough, your closing statement.
Thank you. So 4 years ago, I remember sitting here, and I was nervous as could be, and I remember I had a prepared statement, and I threw it out. And it kind of goes the same as right now. The different thing is, you know, over the last 4 years, when I was running, everybody would ask, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And how do I know you're going to do that? And I said, you're not. The only analytics you're going to get is if you elect me, and in 4 years, you can measure that. And I'm a humble guy, but I've seen all the faces that I recognize in this audience. I think I've done a pretty good job in the last 3.5 years. And I want your vote. I want this job. Livonia is my home. I still remember, you know, are you red or blue? Are you this or that? You know what? At the end of the day, I'm Livonia, and I've proven it. And I'm going to continue to prove it. I'm vested in this community. I want this job, and I need your vote. So everyone in here, you guys get out and vote. This is a pivotal election. Local matters. Do your research. Thank you.
All right, with that, we will conclude our city council portion of the candidate. At this time, we'd like the audience to acknowledge each candidate for their participation this evening and their willingness to serve our community. Good luck to each of you in your campaigns. We're going to take about a 15-minute break, and then we'll get into our mayor candidate forum. All right, and now we will move into the candidates for mayor. We have incumbent Mayor Maureen Miller-Brosnan and incumbent City Council member Kathleen McIntyre, who are each running for a 4-year term as mayor of Livonia, a full-time position as the Chief Executive Officer for the city. Each mayoral candidate will be invited to make 1-minute opening statement and a 90-second closing statement. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer each question. Each candidate will have the chance to use 2 30-second rebuttals to their opponent's response if their opponent had the chance to speak after they've had the last chance to speak to a question. Again, we have Laura Tamuch and Sherry Davidek in the front row, who will serve as our timekeepers and inform the candidates of how much time they have left. And with that, again, we did order by a draw of numbers afterwards, and we'll begin with Mrs. Kathleen McIntyre. Please go ahead with your opening statement.
Thank you. Good evening, Livonia. I'm very happy to be here tonight. I'm not just running for mayor. I'm running to be your voice, your advocate, and the city's chief problem solver. I've been a Livonia resident for 45 years. My husband and I have lived in the same house since 1996, when we came back to Livonia to raise our family here. I am really proud of this city, and I want to make sure it's the best it can be for all of us. During my 30 years of working in the private business sector and my 8 years on city council, I've been known as a workhorse. I have focused on the essentials, supporting our outstanding police and fire, pushing back on wasteful spending, and advocating for all residents, including our seniors. As mayor, I will be the same transparent, engaged, and accessible leader that I've always been, fully committed to making this absolutely the best place to work, live, and play. I'm Kathleen McIntyre, and I'm ready to be your mayor.
All right, Mrs. Brosnan.
Good evening. Over the last 4 years, it's been the honor of my life to serve as your mayor of the city of Livonia. You know, despite some unexpected challenges, I've worked with you to deliver this community some of the most amazing things that we've seen in the past 4 years. We've addressed a police and a fire shortage like none other, getting both departments back to 90% staffing. Now, this means safer schools, safer neighborhoods, better response times when you need the police and fire the most. We've delivered transformational investments in fixing our roads. We've supported our small businesses. We've strengthened our neighborhoods. We've built more of our parks. We fought for and won our fair share of funding, and we've done all of this while we've managed to stay one of the lowest tax rates in Wayne County. But there's more work to do. So I want to make sure that we keep moving our community forward, and that's why I'm running for mayor this fall. Tonight, I look forward to sharing with you many of the stories about how we've taken things to the next level in our community.
All right, the first question will go to Mrs. Brosnan. As a city office holder, what have you done to support the morale of police officers and firefighters in Livonia, and what more can be done going forward? again, as a city office holder, what have you done to support the morale of police officers and firefighters in Livonia, and what can be done going forward?
Thanks, Dan. Great question. So in the first 6 months of office, I had made a pledge to our police officers and firefighters that if they invested their lives and put their lives on the line for us as the city of Livonia, that we would in turn invest in them, that we would in turn turn around and invest in a defined benefit program. Quite honestly, something that 4 mayors before me and for the past 20 years, we haven't been able to bring to our police officers and firefighters. We were successful in securing that defined benefit program for them, and we were one of the few cities in the state that was able to do that. So that is a big part of that commitment to them, and it was made early in this administration.
All right, Ms. McIntyre?
Thank you, Dan. When I was interviewing with the police department and fire department before my first election in 2015, I told them that I was a defined benefit kind of gal, defined contribution kind of gal, but I thought we ask our public safety folks to do something we don't ask anyone else to do. And that's evidenced by the difficulty in finding people to fill those positions. So I fully supported returning to defined benefit from day one, and the mayor got that approved with council's strong support. During the summer of 2022, our police department came under unprecedented, unfair, and political attacks from all sides, alleging all sorts of horrible things about racism, lack of professional conduct. I stood up forcefully and vocally to those critics, and I took a lot of heat and a lot of personal grief for doing that. I never wavered in my support for our police, and I never wavered in standing up for what I knew was the best police department. Thank you.
All right, the next question, we'll go to Ms. McIntyre. There's been a debate at City Hall about updating the Livonia's non-discrimination ordinance. What does an effective NDO look like to you? There has been a debate at City Hall about updating Livonia's non-discrimination ordinance. What does an effective NDO look like to you, Ms. McIntyre?
Well, I think it starts with understanding what the purpose and the need for an NDO is. I hear a lot that our NDO hasn't been updated since 1982, and reflexively you say, well, that can't be good. That's a long, long time ago. And I don't disagree with re-examining our NDO, but taking our NDO from an ordinance that is protective of everyone to an ordinance that punishes business. It has the potential to punish businesses because one person claims that they saw or witnessed discrimination and makes the city, the judge and the jury, is not the way to go about it. So I'm open to talking about an NDO. I'm not open to the NDO that came to the council and to which the mayor would not yield at all or entertain any discussion or negotiation on.
Mrs.
Thank you.
Brosnan?
Thanks. Dan, could you repeat the question?
There has been debate at City Hall about updating Livonia's non-discrimination ordinance. What does an effective NDO look like to you?
So an effective NDO is one that in one place within our city ordinances gathers together a description of all of the people that we wish to embrace in our community. The ordinance as it currently stands is smattered throughout our city ordinances, and it doesn't really do a good job of reflecting where we're at today. A 1982 rendition of an ordinance that clearly doesn't include everybody is one that's going to keep us stepping backwards in time. So the ordinance that we have that was put before the council earlier this year was one that was developed in conjunction with many members of the council and with the business community. I still contend that it's probably the best vehicle that we've got in order to make sure we present ourselves as the arms wide open community that we are.
Rebuttal?
Yes, please. The discussion with the business community was limited to the board of directors primarily of the Livonia Chamber of Commerce and their Governmental Affairs Committee. I had many, many discussions with businesses large and small. There are many businesses that would never want to stand up and say they oppose a non-discrimination ordinance, because who could be against non-discrimination? The business community did not support the ordinance as it was written, and these are businesses that embrace us as a wide open community, but understood the inherent problems with it. Thank you.
Mrs. Brosnan?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. You know, that would be true if Councilwoman McIntyre understood the work that the mayor's office did in part largely before this came to the council. I meet on a quarterly basis with all of our major institutions in the city of Livonia, not only educational, but our largest businesses in the city. Each one of them, in the course of discussions on a quarterly basis, brought this issue to our attention. And most apparent was the company of Masco, one of our largest employers. This was something that I met regularly with their leadership team to discuss.
All right, our next question will start with Ms. McIntyre. Many Livonia residents and businesses sustained several widespread prolonged power outages this year. What conversations have you had with DTE Energy and state officials that regulate electrical service to address these outage issues? Again, many Livonia residents and businesses sustained several widespread prolonged power outages this year. What conversations have you had with DTE Energy and state officials that regulate electrical service to address these outage issues? Mrs. McIntyre.
These power outages started long before this year. There have been apparent for at least the last 3 or 4 or 5 years that there are problems with Livonia's grid. These didn't start this year. Our residents, understandably, in our businesses are very upset and disrupted and find a great deal of expense and sometimes danger in these outages. It is not the City Council's job to go and engage DTE. I did, however, repeatedly ask the City Council President and Vice President if they would bring someone from DTE into City Council to hear the concerns and explain to us what the issues were. And I also talked to our state representatives. One of our state representatives, who I met at a business with, was amazed that he was not included in the DTE meeting that the mayor held. The utilities are regulated at the state level. So when the mayor decided to have the meeting, that was great. There were no state representatives there, there was one member of council invited. So I thank you.
Mrs. Brosnan.
Thanks, Dan. So I've met on a regular basis with our friends from DTE, and we really do consider them partners in this effort. While we remain tough and we challenge them on a regular basis, we think the best way forward to work with DTE is to try to find a way where we're constantly being vigilant in watching and tracking the work that they're trying to do, while presenting at the same time opportunities for them to improve the system. So we met with DTE as a result of the last storm, but that wasn't the first time. Jerry Norcia, the CEO of the company, calls after just about every storm, whether it's at midnight, 2 in the morning. He calls my house to find out how we're doing in Livonia. So we have regular conversations with them. Our next one is scheduled for the end of October.
All right, next question. This will start with Mrs. Brosnan. Can you share an example of where you collaborated effectively with somebody with whom you've had a disagreement or political differences, and what were the results of those efforts? Again, can you share an example of where you collaborated effectively with somebody with whom you've had a disagreement or political differences, and what were the results of those efforts? Ms. Brosnan.
So this is one I love. When I first started as mayor, I disagreed with Warren Evans, Wayne County executive, on the number of vaccines that were coming into our community. Disagreed with him vehemently, and he wasn't really happy about that. Later on, learned that he was in fact getting as much of the vaccine as we could possibly get here. Worked along with Terry Murray, our Wayne County Commissioner, to make sure that we in fact got enough vaccine to vaccinate 1 out of every 5 of our Livonia residents. So had to get a little tough there, but in the end we got what we wanted. Unfortunately, it created a bit of a bad relationship. And as a result, we've had a little bit more difficulty in securing some of the money that we've needed in order to advance our senior center. But we've been able to work together, and we're on the verge of reporting an $8 million grant from Wayne County as a result of a really good relationship.
Mrs. McIntyre.
I could give a lot of examples. The one that I'll use is my work and my meetings and discussions with the Save the Noble Library group. A number of people who are very active in that group were very, very harshly critical of me in 2020. And when that group reached out and I understood the work that they were doing, even though there were a number of people there that had been really harsh with me, I thought it was very, very important to sit down and start a conversation about, I understood why they don't want the library to come down. No one wants a library to come down. No one wants an iconic building to come down. But I went over to the meeting and I sat and I listened. And that was the first of several discussions. And as a result of that, it doesn't change my belief that we can't that we can't move forward on saving the library until we've identified sustainable funding, but it certainly informed my understanding of the situation and made me appreciate all the perspectives of the people that want to save the library.
The next question will begin with Ms. McIntyre. What can the city do to support local business efforts to attract and retain talent for their operations? Again, what can the city do to support local business efforts to attract and retain talent for their operations? Mrs. McIntyre.
Well, the first thing that the city needs to do, any city needs to do in supporting businesses, is to offer a business-friendly environment. You have to have a safe community. If you don't have a safe community, businesses are not going to stay and they're not going to want to come here. The second thing is to have a very competitive tax structure, which we have. The third thing is to have a good infrastructure with good roads and good services, which we have. The workforce development piece, it is not, the city, and I laud the mayor's work she's done on workforce development. It is not solely the city's responsibility to develop the workforce. But what we are doing, and I'll give an example, NYX, and I think it was mentioned in the previous forum, has to run their own transportation system to bring in employees, to have sufficient numbers of employees. I've been part of the task force that came out of the Livonia leader collaboration. I've been part of the transportation task force, working on a solution that does involve some microtransit and app on demand. Those are the places where the city can be most effective in supporting our businesses with workforce. Thank you.
Mrs. Brosnan.
Thanks, Dan. I love this question because the question isn't what can you do? The question for my team and my administration, the time I've been in office, is what have you done? And we've done a lot around this area. This is something that, as my opponent states, not a lot of communities our size see this as their responsibility. I do see this as our responsibility to make sure that we have a really viable workforce in our community so that we attract businesses, so we attract young people to our community. So what we've done here is we put together $325,000 in small business grants that have been awarded to 15 startup businesses in our community that not only help them to survive the post-COVID economy, but to thrive in it. We've also put together a program that makes sure that our kids that are coming out of high school that are really well trained, but maybe not on that four-year path to college, are finding their way to really good, well-paying jobs through internships, apprenticeships, and journeyman programs. So this program is called Pure Potential. It works in our community, and it's one that no other community has.
All right, the next question will go to Mrs. Brosnan, and this one is, do you support short-term rental properties in neighborhoods such as Airbnbs? Again, do you support short-term rental properties in neighborhoods such as Airbnbs? Mrs. Brosnan?
The City Council has taken this issue up, and they've got some, I think, really good parameters that they've got before them to put in place around short-term rentals. And I do think that there's a viable way to make that happen in our city if the right regulations are put in place.
Mrs. McIntyre?
Thank you, Dan. The City Council spent a lot of time on this issue. I am a strong supporter of individual property rights and am always wary of placing arbitrary restrictions on property use. However, we could see that in a number of areas, and they were very specific houses, and there weren't a lot, but where they existed, they were party Airbnbs. And they were incredibly disruptive and had a very detrimental effect on the quality of life for the neighbors. So we moved to put all of the short-term, all of the Airbnb, the Verbos, under our short-term rental ordinance in the city, which requires annual inspections, which requires a whole threshold of conditions be met. That was tremendously valuable, and we saw the results in the steep decline to none that I'm currently aware of, where we have the problems with the Airbnb party houses.
All right, next question, we'll start with Mrs. McIntyre. This is a question about the owners of long-term vacant properties, such as the House of Denmark on Plymouth Road and the Kmart site. What can the city do to expedite redevelopment of these long-term vacant sites? We'll start with you, Mrs. McIntyre.
Well, it starts with enforcing our blight ordinances and our regulations about what property owners are required to do to vacant properties. And because we have some staffing issues in the ordinance department, we are not able to aggressively pursue remedies for blighted properties, be they residential or be they commercial. The Vision 21 plan gives us a roadmap to how to future land use. and ideas and new zoning codes to allow flexibility in redevelopment. The city has to be very, very transparent in our plans when we're working with developers. We have to listen to the residents, but we've got to get to the heart of the blight issue, because once a property is blighted, and we see this right now with Vassar Street, it becomes much, much more challenging for it to be redeveloped.
Mrs. Brosnan?
Dan, I want to really echo everything that my opponent just stated. Both of us have served in the capacity of working on Livonia Vision 21, so we inherently understand what the benefit to the community is supposed to be with Livonia Vision 21. Livonia Vision 21 was the city's very creative way of allowing developers to redevelop properly in a more diverse fashion. So places like the House of Denmark that you mentioned, the Vassar Street property, it allows for redevelopment that is creative, and it's really the strongest tool that we have in our toolbox next to our ordinance enforcement. And we're working constantly and diligently to make sure that we get as many of those spots filled within our city as we possibly can.
Okay, the next question will first go to Ms. Brosnan. The Livonia Council opted out of retail recreational medicinal marijuana sales. Would you support a reexamination of this opt-out decision? Again, the Livonia City Council opted out of retail recreational medicinal marijuana sales. Would you support a reexamining of this opt-out decision? Mrs. Brosnan.
So this is a great question in understanding where the role of the mayor resides and where the role of the council resides. I deeply respect the position that the council has taken in opting out of that. They don't have, in this current council, an interest in moving forward with retail cannabis in Livonia. They are the governing authority over zoning issues and making decisions along that line. After this next election, if there is a majority of the council that indicates that they have a desire to reconsider this matter, I would encourage them to engage in an open discussion with residents, making sure that all voices are heard, but that predominantly the voice of our Livonia Police Department is heard.
Ms. McIntyre.
I'll be off the council at the end of this year. I am unapologetic in my support for Livonia opting out of recreational and medical marijuana sales. Mayor Brosnan mentioned the police. Our police department is 100% against this. And I should say the many, many officers, probably at least 80% that I've spoken to are against this. I haven't heard any that are in favor of it. The 10% excise tax that comes back to the city is essentially to compensate cities who do this for the additional costs related to additional crime, additional policing, issues that you have sometimes that go on with customers. And I'm not drawing any generalities about the customers of recreational marijuana, but you can look at the communities that have it. It creates a lot of issues, a lot of taxes on city services and police. I will never apologize for thinking this was the right decision to opt out.
Very good. Well, we'll take a moment here for the lightning round and give the candidates a chance to give a little background to themselves, get to know them a little bit better. So the first one will go to Ms. McIntyre. Ms. McIntyre, what was your first concert?
Barry Manilow, and that was back when Barry Manilow was at the end of being cool. And then he became really uncool, but I still listened to his records, and now I don't listen to him as much, and now he's back to being cool, so.
Ms. Brosnan, your first concert.
First concert, Mom and Dad at Pine Knob, Johnny Mathis. Classic.
All right. Mrs. Brosnan, what is your favorite cartoon character?
Oh, gosh. You know, I love the Roadrunner. He's fast. He's impatient. He's just really working hard to get things done, and I loved the way he just spat across the screen all the time.
Mrs. McIntyre, your favorite cartoon character?
Well, I think I identify with Lucy. I'm not as, I never pull the football away from everyone, but I am fairly opinionated, and I travel with a pack of friends, so it's definitely Lucy.
All right, and the last one in the lightning round, Ms. McIntyre, if you could meet any living person for dinner, who would it be and why?
Well, it might be a little bit obscure, but an author by the name who's also a brilliant surgeon of Atul Gawande. He is a brilliant surgeon, a brilliant writer. And two of the most important books that I've read in the last few years were written by him. The first is Being Mortal, which is an incredible dive into what it means to age and deal with your mortality, and it provokes so many questions. And the second is the checklist manifesto, which is a way that any business in any field can improve how they go about things. He used it in surgery to greatly reduce surgical errors, but it's applicable for any field.
Ms. Brosnan.
You know, I live and breathe this job, and I have crazy dreams about meeting people like the gentleman at one time who owned Sheldon Mall, because I really wanted to get a hold of him and figure out how we were going to redevelop that and make that a better piece of property at one point in time. Today, I dream about meeting the gentleman who owns the Sears store in Livonia at 7 Mile. I'd like to get my hands on him.
All right, very good. Well, thank you for that, and now we'll get back into some more audience questions here. And the first one will go to Mrs. Brosnan. I'm going to try my best to, I guess, make this as clear as I can off this question. But there's a lot of talk about Livonia Vision 21 and redeveloping the Livonia Civic Center site, repurposing libraries, possibly adding some more public transit options. And I guess the question is, how do we pay for that? So we'll start with Mrs. Brosnan on that.
It's such a good question, and it's one that this administration has bravely dove into. We understood then, we took on this dream of envisioning what was going to happen here at this 5 Mile and Farmington intersection and how we were going to build this downtown, that in fact we needed to understand what the scope and size of the problem was. So last year we started diving in with our friends over at Plant Moran Cressa on what is the cost exactly of maintaining the structures that we have just here on this complex. And what is the cost of just simply maintaining them, making sure that the lights are on and the windows are working and the HVAC system, unlike here, is working. And we learned that it's going to cost us $96.7 million over the course of the next 10 years. Knowing that, understanding that is critical. So we've now gone to the next phase of research where we're now asking ourselves, so what is our highest and best use for this property? And it's those two equations that are eventually going to come together to help us figure out the answer to that very important question.
So, Ms. McIntyre.
Thank you, Dan. And Livonia Vision 1 included a number of facets. One of the most important was the focus on the redevelopment of the Civic Center campus, the old Sears property, and the larger Livonia Mall, the larger Wonderland Livonia Mall property, and also development along the Plymouth Road corridor between Middlebelt and Inkster. I've heard the mayor talk about a vision for Civic Center that we would sell off a lot of the property that now where City Hall and our other buildings are located to fund development. I don't know how we're going to fund the new City Hall, the Civic Center part. I do know that with the Sears project, the opportunity there, once the Sears owners are willing to sell that building, and as the mayor referenced, that's far from certain. Once that piece of property becomes available, that will be purchased by developers who then will have the money to make the investment into the kind of mixed-use development that we'd like to see there. But the funding for the Civic Center, I think, is still a big question mark.
All right, next question is kind of a follow-up to this, but I guess we're asking a prioritization of this. What parts of Livonia's infrastructure need the most attention, and how would you fund such investments? Again, what parts of Livonia's infrastructure need the most attention, and how would you fund such investments? That will go with Ms. McIntyre.
Well, you just heard the mayor say that Plant Moran Cressa has told us that just to maintain our current facilities, we need over $90 million over the next 10 years. If you look around this building, you can see that it's not in great shape. However, we don't have the funding to say we're going to replace City Hall right now. We are looking at a very tough budget next year in the city for the 2024 fiscal year budget. We've had to eliminate a lot of capital expenditures. We are very reluctant to go out right now and bond for any new development because of the cost of borrowing and also the cost of construction. So for right now, we are, and the other thing that we need to look at is, do we need all 100 of those buildings? But whatever we can thrift from there will not be a substantial amount of money. I think that making investments into our parks is incredibly important, a piece of making our infrastructure attractive to everyone in this city.
Mrs. Brosnan?
Dan, could you repeat the question? I want to make sure I answer it directly.
What part of Livonia's infrastructure need the most attention, and how would you fund such investments?
Okay, so it really does come down to the infrastructure that exists here on City Hall right now. Like I say, we've scoped it out, and we understand the size of this problem. We understand that if we don't begin to put a plan in place for getting our arms around it, that we're just going to kick this can down the road like others kicked the can down the road and quite honestly dumped it in our lap. So it's time to solve that problem. I don't know what the answer is, because while we know the size of it, we know that simply selling property isn't the answer, that there really does truly have to be some kind of public-private partnership. This will be the primary focus of my next administration.
All right, the next question, we'll start.
Dan?
Oh, I'm sorry, rebuttal,
I'd
please.
I'd like a rebuttal. Private-public partnerships sound very, very good, but they're very hard to accomplish, and I'm not ever sure what they mean. We've had a discussion about public-private partnership, there we go, at the Noble Library as one way of funding what needs to be done over there. What that generally comes down to is selling city property and hoping that you can find a developer who will work within the parameters that you want. So, you know, the public partner, great idea, but it's never quite clear how that gets executed. Thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Brosnan?
I'm a mayor who never says never. Everybody said we weren't going to be able to move that senior center. We're on our way to moving it, folks, and we're not going to do it and cost taxpayers one dime. Never say never. We will figure this out. We are smart people in Livonia. We are made of smart businesses. We can engage smart business leaders. We figured out what Livonia needed in Livonia Vision 21 by engaging smart business leaders. We will do it again with good leadership, and we will figure this out.
All right, next question, kind of a heavier subject, but there's been a notable increase in the rates of suicide across the nation. What can the city do to fill the gaps in services available to people to minimize the incidence of people reaching critical points in their distress? Again, that question, there's been a notable increase in the rates of suicide across the nation. What can the city do to fill gaps in services available to people to minimize the incidence of people reaching critical points in their distress? And that question will go to Mrs. Brosnan first.
Thanks, Dan. So let's not talk about what we can do again. Let's talk about what we have done. Coming out of COVID, we recognized that there was an extremely vulnerable population that we could help in Livonia, and that was our senior citizens. So we put together, using our CDBG funding, a program that helped us to train people in our senior housing units how to look for the early signs of suicide. And as a result of training those trainers and making people more aware of the stresses that people were under, our seniors in particular, in a post-COVID environment, we know we saved 9 lives. We know we had seniors that came forward and said, I didn't know how I was going to cope. And they had somebody that was trained to look for the signs of suicide and stopped horrible things from happening. So this administration takes this problem very seriously, and while we can't solve the whole problem, we are working really hard to get our arms around it, one piece at a time.
Ms. McIntyre?
Thank you, Dan. The senior program was very successful, and even saving 1 life would have made it successful. Where we see the greatest rates of suicide are in our young people. And unfortunately, the city government does not have sway over the public schools. And the public school situation with the shutdowns was very difficult. I don't envy anybody who was on the school board who worked in education at that time. But by shutting down the schools, as we did, for such a long period of time, we had 5 years of kids, at least, middle school through high school, turning away from socialization, from education in a group setting, to social media and loneliness. The city cannot solve that problem, but what the city can do is work with the school district, work with our other stakeholders, to always be a voice for asking for consideration of looking at issues like the school district through the wider lens of what's good for everyone in this community.
All right, next question, and this will go to Mrs. McIntyre first. Do you have any ideas for the development of stronger local and regional public transit systems? Do you have any ideas for the development of stronger local and regional public transit systems? And we'll start with Ms. McIntyre.
This is a great question, Dan, and yes, I do. And I mentioned that one of the task forces that came out of your Livonia Community Leaders Forum was the Transportation Task Force, which I've been working on and very engaged in. When we opted out of SMART, it was the right decision for Livonia. We put our own transportation system in place. The demographics of our residents, the needs of our residents, the economics of running those systems has changed. Still, the basis should be, for the present, for our citizens, our Livonia transportation. But we know that more is needed. We know that we have to help workers get to the workplaces and people get into our city to do business. Opting back into SMART and signing up for the regional partnership is not the way forward to do it. One of the direct experiences we had on the task force was actually taking one of the Smart Flex. The future of our integrated transportation in Livonia is going to start with the micro things like the MicroFlex and on-demand apps.
Mrs. Brosnan?
Thanks, Dan. And again, I don't want to talk about what we're going to do. I want to talk about what we've done. Because in the past 4 years, this has been an issue that we really have taken to heart. This administration has put together $150,000 in grant funding to undertake a study that we've engaged in with the Regional Transit Authority to get to some of the answers that you just heard my opponent espouse. We don't know what the answers are. We're going to go seek the answers from experts. We're going to go ask people in the community what it is that they want to see in a regional transit system. And then we've got the money that we put together to actually build the plan. And once you build the plan in response to something that the community has said that they want, you will find a way to fund that option. Does some of that include Smart Flex? It probably does. Does some of it include maintaining the current bus system that we currently have? A portion of it probably does. All of these are options that we're going to be able to explore because this administration has put the money forward to engage in the study that's going to bring us the answers.
All right, next question, and this will start with Ms. Brosnan. How will you maintain and enhance our current allotment of parks and green spaces in Livonia? How will you maintain and enhance our parks and green spaces in Livonia? Ms. Brosnan.
Again, let's talk about what we've done. We have invested more in our parks during the course of the past 4 years than we have historically in this city. We have added adaptive parks, parks that senior citizens along with their grandchildren can use, people with special needs can use. These are unique to parks in Michigan. So we are doing an amazing job of not only maintaining our parks, but taking them to that next level. We are going to continue to do that using our Parks and Recreation millage. We're going to continue to do that while we engage the community. One of the key check marks in this administration is that we put together, again, a long-range strategic plan, a Parks and Recreation master plan. We never had a roadmap before. We have the roadmap. We know what we need to do to bring these amenities to our residents.
Ms. McIntyre?
Thank you. And there have been good investments in our parks. We've also tremendously benefited from the personal largesse and philanthropy of Tom Chelani, who built the new accessible playground at Bicentennial Park. The city did add the senior component of that. The roadmap is great. We are challenged with funding, extremely challenged with funding. We have a situation where we have 3 community pools. 2 have received significant updates in the last 5 years. 1 has not. We cannot fully staff those pools. When you look at the cost of running 1 pool, it's significant. So the question becomes, should you look at the pool, which has not been revitalized, which we staff the less, could you take the funding that now goes to that pool and transfer that to the park, and that's Sheldon Park, and use that to enhance the facilities that are there, which are not even close to any of our other parks. Thanks.
All right, that's all the time we have for questions. We will now go into closing statements, and we will begin with Mrs. McIntyre. You have 90 seconds for your closing statement.
Thanks, Dan. It's been great spending this time with you tonight. As we conclude, I'd like to recap why I'm your best choice for mayor. I bring a unique blend of private business and public service experience. I've been an engaged, results-driven city council leader, focused on the issues that matter most to our residents and our businesses. The city doesn't need a chief storyteller as much as it needs a chief problem solver. My track record demonstrates delivering tangible results for our citizens. I'll be accessible and laser-focused on making our city government work for you, the taxpayers. Whether it's ensuring the highest levels of public safety, fighting wasteful spending, to focusing and enhancing the services that mean the most to our residents. Thank you for listening tonight. Thank you for supporting. I'm Kathleen McIntyre, and I'm ready to be your mayor.
All right, Ms. Brosnan, your closing statement.
I'd like to thank the Livonia Chamber of Commerce for putting this event together and for coordinating the almost 100 ribbon cuttings that I've attended as mayor. I want to thank all of you for participating tonight and for watching at home. 4 years ago, I spoke with over 46,000 of you on your doorsteps, and you told me what you wanted me to pay attention to as your mayor. Well, I'm out knocking on doors again, and I got to be honest with you, your priorities have not changed a whole lot since 2019, and I find it absolutely amazing how many of them we have accomplished. This campaign offers a clear difference in leadership style between a leader who has actually done the work and somebody who talks about doing the work. Because this is what leadership looks like. It looks like keeping a promise to our police and our firefighters and bringing them back a defined benefit program that nobody was able to accomplish over the past 20 years in the course of 4 mayoral administrations. It looks like securing $11.5 million in grant funding and building a new senior wellness center. It looks like 17 miles of road that have been restored and improvements made on 50 of our local streets. You know, together we have done a lot, but together there is still an awful lot more for us to do. So I'm asking for your vote so that we can continue to do this amazing work.
All right, with that, we conclude the mayoral portion of our candidate forum, and we would like the audience to acknowledge each candidate for their participation this evening. I would like to thank all the candidates for coming out tonight, Livonia City Television for their work today, our chamber staff and our members of our committee, and all of you for coming out this evening. Enjoy your evening, and remember to vote by November 7th. Have a great evening, all. Thank you.